Welcome to Primetime Weekend. I'm Nicole Wallace. Let's get right to the week's top stories. A racist and bizarre conspiracy theory about Haitian immigrants eating people's dogs and cats who live in that city, spread in large part by neo-Nazis, as NBC News reports today, went from the darkest corners of the internet to the mouths of elected Republicans like Ted Cruz, and then leapt to the national debate stage thanks to the unhinged rantings of the ex-president. It's now roiling this community and everybody in it. 2 elementary schools had to be evacuated, and a middle school was shut down as a result of bomb threats. The mayor of the town telling the Washington Post that the threats, quote, used hateful language toward immigrants and Haitians in our community. The mayor even had to go on national television and say this.
Springfield is still beautiful, and your pets are safe in Springfield, Ohio. Safe. So what this has done is created a negative light, obviously, that we did not look for, we did not ask for.
Let's stop right here. The mayor of an actual town, actual constituents, had to go on TV and say the pets are safe here. This is where we are. This is who Donald Trump would make us in America in 2024 and beyond if he wins. And as absurd as it might be, the instinct to laugh exists, of course, because it's so preposterous. But what's happening in Springfield is another moment where the stakes of our choice in November become abundantly clear. Voters face a choice between a candidate who wants to turn the page on all of this, the talking cat and dog memes, all of it, the danger, the threats, the bomb threats, a candidate who's crisscrossing the country, delivering a positive, hopeful message about you. And the other choice would be handing the presidential bully pulpit, the entire prestige of the American presidency, back to someone who surrounded himself this time with absolute whack jobs, conspiracy theorists, racist crackpots, someone who has no hesitation about spreading outright lies that put real human beings, real Americans in danger, as long as he thinks it benefits him. The Bulwark puts it like this, quote, has there ever been a better microcosm of our Trumpified politics, a small town strained by a wave of new migrants, thrust into the national spotlight by opportunistic politicians and conservative hucksters, churned through a balkanized media ecosystem that lets false rumors spread like weeds. Trump says he wants to protect these communities. He ends up dividing them, inflaming tensions within them, all while using them as political pawns. He and his allies show no remorse, quite the opposite, actually. Vice presidential nominee, the most unpopular one in history, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, has peddled these lies about his own constituents. He's also invoked the tragic death of Aiden Clark, an 11-year-old boy killed in a car accident by a Haitian migrant. Here's what Aiden's dad had to say about that.
You know, I wish that my son, Aiden Clark, was killed by a 60-year-old white man. I bet you never thought anyone would ever say something so blunt. But if that guy killed my 11-year-old son, the incessant group of hate-spewing people would leave us alone. The last thing that we need is to have the worst day of our lives violently and constantly shoved in our faces. But even that's not good enough for them. They take it one step further. They make it seem as though our wonderful Aiden appreciates your hate, that we should follow their hate. And speaking of morally bankrupt, politicians, Bernie Moreno, Chip Roy, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump, they have spoken my son's name and used his death for political gain. This needs to stop now. In order to live like Aiden, you need to accept everyone. Choose to shine, make the difference, lead the way, and be the inspiration. What many people in this community and state and nation are doing is the opposite of what you should be doing. Sure, we have our problems here in Springfield and in the U.S., but does Aiden Clark have anything to do with that? Did you know that an 11-year-old boy could be passionate about gardening, that he could haggle for a better price at a yard sale? Did you know that he researched different cultures to better appreciate and understand people that he interacted with? Did you know that one of the worst feelings in the world is to not be able to protect your child? Even worse, we can't even protect his memory when he's gone. Please stop the hate. I said to Aiden that I would try to make a difference in his honor. This is it. Live like Aiden. Thank you.
That's where we start today. Our friend Joy Reid is here, host of MSNBC's The ReidOut. Also joining us, Democratic Congresswoman from Ohio, Shontel Brown. Congresswoman, I start with you, and I wanted to give Aiden's dad that time just to center our conversation in what this is and this isn't. Right? We're not leading today with Laura Loomer. She's a disgrace. Just ask Lindsey Graham and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we're not leading with how xenophobia worked once. Maybe it'll work again. Oh no. We're leading with the humans that Trump is willing to sacrifice in his pursuit to stay out of jail. This campaign isn't about building a wall. This campaign isn't about you. This campaign isn't about anybody. This campaign isn't even about his family. They're nowhere to be seen. This campaign is about using that man's 11-year-old son to stay out of jail.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a powerful testimony from his father that encourages us to live like Aiden, because he recognizes the disgraceful, dangerous, and really racist and wrong tropes that are being spread by the Trump-Vance ticket. Listen, I live in Ohio, and I know that the people of Ohio have to be experiencing buyer's remorse as they look at J.D. Vance and the comments that he has made since he has risen to the opportunity to become the second most powerful person in the world. That should really give people pause. When we are talking about these lies and dishonest things that they're willing to say at all costs, they're willing to do anything to try to get their hands on the power switch, and that is problematic on so many levels. Ohio is a place where the Secretary of State has purged over 100,000 voters, giving testimony on the Hill just this week. And this is the thing, they're trying to make this race even more difficult for people to have their voices heard. So I think we need to take all of that into consideration and recognize how high the stakes are for this 2024 election. You said it very well. The contrast could not be more clear.
And Joy, I guess the point here is that if Donald Trump is willing to sacrifice, and I want to just quote the dad here, his father said, quote, "We can't even protect his memory when he's gone." So if Donald Trump wants to decimate the memory of an 11-year-old boy for political gain, people should stop and recognize that there's nothing he won't desecrate. Nothing.
I mean, nothing. Arlington National Cemetery, the memory of this sweet little boy. I mean, here's the reality, Nicole. This is the logical end of the Republican Party. This is where they've been going. Katie Britt, when she gave her State of the Union response, used a story that was completely misleading to denigrate immigrants. When James David, when J.D. Vance ran for the United States Senate in the first place, his main ad he ran started with the line, "Are you a racist?" He then proceeds to denigrate immigrants. Donald Trump came upon the scene, at least when I was, as a teenager, moved back to New York. The first time I paid attention to him was when he was calling for the execution of 4 Black and 1 Latino teenage boys who are 14 and 15 years old, lying about them and accusing them of gang rape and making the term wilding so common that it was scary to be a Black teenager, which I was at that time in New York, because you were targeted. You know, as somebody who is the daughter of immigrants, you know, I know what it is like to be that person that eats different food from all your friends, whose household is different, whose mom has a heavy accent and whose father has a heavy accent, and fitting into an American community as an immigrant family is a challenge, right? But the embrace of the country, of the place where I grew up in Montbello, in Denver, Colorado, and being able to still be an American, even with the mom with the accent, like that's what the country is, right? But Donald Trump doesn't believe that that's what the country is. J.D. Vance doesn't believe that. He believes that that he can activate the id of every white American to say, look at that person with a foreign accent. Look at that person with dark skin. Look at them and think of them as a cannibal. Think of them as a monster. Think of them as an animal, a beast, not a human like you. And then I am going to make a bloody change in that dynamic by I'm going to rip them out of your community and save you from them. J.D. Vance said the other day, what's more important, angering 20 or 30,000 who he called illegal immigrants, or saving my people, my constituents? Well, who is the my? He doesn't believe that Americans are like Aiden's dad. He's making a calculation that white Americans are so easily triggered by made-up stories that come from neo-Nazis that they will run to him to protect them. But I think what he's going to find out is that the majority of Americans are like Aiden's dad. They just want to live in a country where they can have their child's memory be undefiled and have their community respected for the melting pot that it is. This is a melting pot community that is thriving because of the immigrants' participation. And you know what? Donald Trump can go to hell with his decision to disrespect, quite honestly, every white voter in this country by saying that you are a dog-barking racist like he is and that you can't discern fantasy from fiction. I don't believe that's true. Kamala Harris doesn't believe that's true. Tim Walz doesn't believe that's true. But James David and Donald Trump believe it's true. We'll find out in about 50 days.
And we should be really clear, he's actually not talking to all immigrant communities or families. My dad wasn't born in America. He's not talking about my dad. It is racism straight up. Donald Trump has devolved since his targeting of the Central Park, his maligning and I mean, he has become something more racist, something more cruel. I mean, I just got through Mary Trump's book and I read Fred Trump's book. And I think we've covered this story erroneously as a policy he latched onto. This isn't a policy. This is the deepest, darkest, most damaged part of him carrying out the most sadistic mass. Well, he only carries it out if he prevails. But the part of Project 2025 that he never runs from is the mass deportation of Americans living in communities, feeding everyone in a community in their diners or restaurants, working in every company in every community. I mean, the whole idea that he's running on policies that are too far right is false. He's running on the broken parts of himself. And I wonder, Congresswoman, you're in the state with the town that's been targeted, and there are real people there, and some of them might be his supporters, but you can't, at that school, the 3 schools that were closed, there were people who may have parents who are, when a school shuts down, nobody gets educated. When kids are at home because they're frightened because their parents have to tell them why the school shut down, everybody has to explain to their child that it was a bomb threat because Donald Trump told fantastical stories about their town. This is something that hurts everyone it touches. And I wonder, in your view, how can people help these communities in your state?
Well, we have to acknowledge the facts. The reality is the mayor of Springfield, the governor of Ohio, the city manager have all debunked this claim, right? And so one of my dearest friends in Congress, Sheila Shifless McCormick, is Haitian. This is hurtful to her. This is hurtful to her community. This is something that was so troubling that I decided to call it out this week in our agriculture committee because it is deliberately divisive, untrue, and racist rhetoric. And it tells you a lot about J.D. Vance and his character, or lack lack thereof. He represents Ohio, and it shows he's willing to denigrate his own community to serve the interests of the maniac of Mar-a-Lago. He puts him above everything. And to your point, it's not every country that they're concerned about. This is the man who called Haitian countries and African countries shithole countries, S-hole countries. This is the man who called out NFL players, majority black, sons of bees. This is the man who instituted an anti-Muslim travel ban when he first got into office. This is the person who started the birther movement of our first African-American president, Barack Obama, questioning his citizenship, his native roots of being born in America. So this is a person who has shown us time and time again, the person who referred to Mexicans as rapists and thugs. So it's very clear to me who he's targeting, because he's been married to 2 of his wives are immigrants. And so we don't hear very much about those type of immigrants when it comes to his disdain for immigrants. His rants are very specific to people of color. And so for me, it is troubling when he is willing to put so many people at risk. To your point, bomb threats have been made at schools in the middle of a council meeting. People are having to evacuate. These are things that are creating chaos and confusion. And I'll just say this last point. We know who the author of confusion is. And if you know, you know.
When we come back, how the Harris campaign is putting reproductive freedom front and center in this campaign. We heard it on the debate stage as the vice president detailed the horrors women are being forced to endure in Donald Trump's post-Roe America. But over on Earth 2, they have a totally delusional and very different and dangerous take. They're saying that it isn't happening at all. And now women who have endured the worst are coming forward and telling the truth, telling their stories. My dear friend Rosie Perez will be here to react to that, along with Democratic Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez.
I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that.
Vice President Harris's powerful defense and response to Donald Trump's claims that everyone wanted Roe overturned at Tuesday night's presidential debate has never happened before. No one's ever said those things on a presidential debate stage. That answer has caused Republicans to start to spiral on the issue, as Vice President Harris unapologetically laid out the actual horrors that Trump has unleashed in America, what he's created for every American woman. It's so threatening to the Republican Party that they're trying to whitewash it, trying to just deny that it's even happening. Trump's former director of the White House Office of Presidential Personnel, a fellow named John McEntee, took to TikTok to cast doubt on whether women were actually being denied care at all.
Can someone track down the women Kamala Harris says are bleeding out in parking lots because Roe v. Wade was overturned? Don't hold your breath.
He seems nice. The callousness, the stupidity politically is astounding. An Idaho woman, Carmen Brewster, who miscarried for 19 days after being turned away from 3 emergency rooms, quickly rebutted that claim.
Present. I'm right here. I had a 19-day miscarriage in Idaho because of the abortion regulations. I blacked out in my hallway due to blood loss. I stopped eating, so my daughter stopped eating. So I had to eat with tears running down my face because it was actually painful to eat because I was in so much pain. Everything hurt. I developed a heart condition called AFib. it means my heart doesn't work right anymore. And it up. So if I get too excited, too hot, too much in pain, too traumatized, my heart up. And so I have to regulate for my heart to keep active. Otherwise, I could have a heart attack and die. I have to deal with these side effects for the rest of my life because of abortion laws. But yeah, women are bleeding out in parking lots.
Take that, John McEntee. Joining me here at the table, my dear friend, actor and activist Rosie Perez. Also joining us, Democratic Congresswoman from New York, Nydia Velázquez. Congresswoman, first of all, just your thoughts. I mean, we live in hyperspeed. How do you feel after Tuesday night's debate?
Well, Kamala Harris was able to present herself to the nation and to make the case that she was ready to serve as our next commander-in-chief.
Yeah, she did. It's amazing that she still has to pass those tests, and all Donald Trump has to do is sort of get his jacket on. But she did something that had never happened before. And, you know, there's all this sort of overdrive speed to consume everything that's going to happen and then to analyze it. But I watched that clip again today, and no woman has stood on the debate stage and described what it's like to have a miscarriage. No woman's ever stood on the debate stage and spoken up for a victim of rape or incest, ever. I mean, that no one's ever had to run against Trump, but no one's ever run. This is the first presidential election to take place in post-Dobbs America.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you think women heard in that moment.
I think women heard somebody advocating for their rights, advocating for their pain, advocating for their need for a successful life. I think that they heard someone really just speaking truth, things that they wanted to say, things that they wanted to raise their hand and say, wait a minute, this is what's the real deal. This is what's really happening. And, you know, I've been pretty silent, as you know, on social media in regards to politics. But after the overturn of Roe v. Wade, I'm like, no, it's time to stand up. This election is so close, and we cannot miss a beat, and we need to get out there and vote. And you can say, well, I'm worried about my taxes. Well, I'm worried about this, and I'm worried about that. I'm worried about women's freedom. I'm worried about the freedom for democracy. I'm worried about a young person getting pregnant who's ready to go to college and is not ready to have a child, and their whole life is going to be turned upside down. I'm worried about the boy who impregnated that woman, who also has dreams and aspirations, and that will be put on hold. I'm worried about all the unwanted children that may come into this world if that man gets elected. I was one of those kids, as you know. I come from abject poverty and severe child abuse. I was an unwanted child. Am I happy I'm here? Yes, but I could have done without all that abuse. And so has so many other people. And you think about Republicans saying, well, I'm worried about my money. You should be worried about your money. Because if that man goes into office, who's going to pick up the tab? You don't like paying for welfare now? Honey, just wait. Who's going to pay for all the family court sessions? Who's going to pay for all the food supplement, the SNAP programs? Who's going to pay for all the Section 8 housing that's going to be needed? Who's going to pay for all of these things? You know, and we want the American dream for everybody. Those American dreams will be put on hold. And that's going to affect our economic wheel as well. But it's also the mental health issue. It breaks my heart, Nicole, and you know this. You've heard me cry over the phone. To think about all the potential abuse that can come with this. Child abuse, spousal abuse. The #1 cause for women of dying during pregnancy is not a miscarriage, it's by their partner, because they did not want to have that child. These are ugly things that we don't like to talk about, but we need to talk about it. So all you women out there and men who have children, who you fought so hard for their future, think about it. Think about your son who goes to spring break and has a great night. And then all of a sudden, the girl says, you know what, I'm pregnant. What's gonna happen if you live in a state where there is an abortion ban? Or if you live in America where there's gonna be a potential national abortion ban? We really have to take things very seriously.
How do you think we got here where Trump has been so successful at I mean, dozens of economists came out and said that the economy will be much better under Harris than Trump. The targeting of innocent immigrant community in a town in Ohio, something he just plucked off the internet, like he doesn't give a, we know he doesn't care about anything, but he's just moving chess pieces around that affect real people's lives. Where did that, the appetite and the support for someone that dehumanizes innocent people, where do you think that came from in our politics?
I think that, unfortunately, some of it was already there, and he just amplified it, you know? And I also think that a lot of people really actually believed in this man. They really thought that he was going to make the country better, and they kind of just fell into it. You know, there's a lot of people that I know who are Republicans, a lot of people that I love who are family members that are close to my heart. I don't want to fight with them anymore. I just want to vote. I want to vote until I am blue in the face to make sure that this man doesn't go into office once again. You know, because they are good people. Those Republicans that I know, they are good people. And they are panicking. They are quietly panicking. After the debate, one of my family members, as you know, called me up and said, okay, go ahead, gloat. Go ahead. He sucked. He sucked. I said, he sure did. You know? And I said, you have to know that that man cannot be president. He had an opportunity to kill it, and he couldn't, because he was next to a person that is ready and capable and is better fit for the job. You know, you got to wake up.
What'd they say?
Nothing. They did not have a response, just like he didn't have a response for Kamala.
Exactly. When we come back, Attorney General Merrick Garland stepping up his defense of the Department of Justice in the face of increasing attacks from Donald Trump and his allies. We'll bring you that story next.
Our norms are a promise that we will fiercely protect the independence of this department from political interference in our criminal investigations. Our norms are a promise that we will not allow this department to be used as a political weapon. And our norms are a promise that we will not allow this nation to become a country where law enforcement is treated as an apparatus of politics.
In the face of such an explicit and profound threat, specifically the prospect of a wholesale, unprecedented dismantling of the rule of law, the Department of Justice is today taking steps to ensure its own independence, to preserve itself and its integrity, to Trump-proof itself, basically. In addition to condemning dangerous and outrageous attacks on the department's career prosecutors, Attorney General Merrick Garland this morning made his mission for these last few months potentially perfectly clear: to, quote, fiercely protect DOJ's independence, to refuse to be used as a political weapon. And in the interest of that mission, AG Garland shared steps already taken. Those include new guidelines on prosecutorial discretion and a reinstatement of policies having to do with communications between DOJ employees and people in Congress or the White House. And on the topic of enhanced protections in the shadow of our first presidential election since Donald Trump's failed coup, the Secret Service today announced the counting and certification of electoral votes that is scheduled again for January 6, 2025. Will for the first time ever be considered a, quote, national special security event, affording it security on par with the State of the Union address and the Super Bowl. Joining our coverage, former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst, our friend Andrew Weissmann is here, and the president and CEO of Democracy Forward, Skye Perryman, is here. Andrew Weissmann, your thoughts on the steps that the Attorney General is taking?
Well, Nicole, I have a lot of thoughts. So first, the only way to Trump-proof the Department of Justice to have it not be a political arm of the White House is at the ballot box. The President of the United States has the power to make the Department of Justice be just like any other agency and to be politicized. The reason it is not is because you currently have a sitting president whose view is that the Department of Justice is independent and makes independent decisions, such as prosecuting a Democratic senator or prosecuting his own son. And so that comes from a norm. So for anyone listening who's thinking about how to Trump-proof, that is depoliticize a Department of Justice, it is at the ballot box. And that is the only way. Everything else that the Attorney General in all good faith can try and put in place, those are all measures that are internal to the Department of Justice, and they can be gone with the wind. They're gone with the next presidential election if Donald Trump were to win. I commend the Attorney General for making these statements. I think it's a little late. We've known that this has been a dangerous process for a long time. And I think it's incumbent on the department to, in the face of all of the people who have been subject to the kind of harassment and the threats that he has spoken about quite eloquently today, those people can be the subject of criminal investigations and prosecutions, and there needs to be a really concerted effort to make sure that there are no more Ruby Freeman and Shay Mosses, the two women who were very famously and regrettably targeted by the former president and his allies. And so that really has to be a priority so that there is a deterrent effect and we're not left with just words.
I mean, Andrew Weissmann, lots of times you're on this show explaining things to us. I think today you're sort of leveling with us that this is window dressing. And I know you don't ever intend to be harsh about Attorney General Merrick Garland, but the assessment in its bluntness is, and I want to press a little bit more. I mean, there are, to your point, prosecutions that can be made or cases that can be brought where laws have been broken. And there's a real sense that the effort, I mean, swatting is rampant. Jocelyn Benson was swatted twice, I think, in August. The people who are in the public eye with respect, take out Democratic politicians, just responsibilities to protect and safeguard our election are the targets of ongoing harassment and criminal activity potentially. I mean, why not announce efforts to enforce the existing laws when election officials are targeted by Trump's allies?
And that is something that there should have been a group of people tasked with doing that, a task force created solely focused on that, and an announcement and publicizing of those prosecutions. Swatting, just to take that example, Nicole, is illegal. You cannot call and say something false to law enforcement at the state, local, or federal level. Those are crimes. They can be investigated and they can be prosecuted. And that's how you deter things, in the same way that the department has done an admirable job with respect to the January 6th cases, at least with respect to those people who were entering and trying to enter the Capitol, maybe not so much with respect to people above that. So that is something that, the Attorney General is acted in good faith, but there's definitely criticism in terms of whether he has done enough.
The pro-democracy coalition could have been tricky, right? Instead, it's all fallen into place. I mean, Liz and Dick Cheney are as enthusiastic and insistent that for the country to remain a democracy, Kamala Harris must prevail, as Bernie Sanders and AOC are. What do you make of the reaction to that? That Trump, instead of fighting for the center right, is attaching himself to the likes of Laura Loomer?
I think it just shows you how high the stakes are and what this election is really about. This is far beyond politics. It is about our freedom. It is about our democracy. We know that in Project 2025, there are efforts to weaponize the Department of Justice, to turn it into an institution that would not protect voters, but would seek to intimidate them. And we see those policies in so many different states already taking place, with raids in Texas, which of course we've seen the Attorney General, warn about. And so I really think that this just showcases the stakes of this election. And this is an election that is not about politics. It is about freedom and democracy.
When we come back, Vice President Harris did not just lay out her vision for the country's future, as we've been discussing. She masterfully set trap after trap after trap for Donald Trump, and he took the bait time after time after time. Someone who knows that dynamic well will be here, Mary Trump, on how her uncle just could not help himself. Hook, line, sinker. He just can't help himself. Tough question. Vice President Harris and some of her evolving policy positions completely transformed in an instant into a discussion about exactly how many millions of dollars Donald Trump's dad gifted him that he then squandered. That's the truth. It's right in line with what NBC News reported before the debate, that among the advice Hillary Clinton provided to Vice President Harris, turning the tables was one of the specifics. That is, avoiding the bait where possible and instead provoking Trump directly. And as we all saw last night, it worked. Even during the debate, a Republican operative was telling our colleague, Dasha Burns, that it was Trump taking her bait, a missed opportunity, he said. Watch how he flailed when Vice President Harris brought up Trump's past comments about the Central Park Five.
Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park Five. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now.
Joining us now, Mary Trump, niece of ex-President Donald Trump, author of the exquisite new book, Who Could Ever Love You, a family memoir. Mary, the book is, there's pain on every page. And I just have to ask you how you do that.
First of all, it's wonderful to be with you again, especially on a good occasion of the debate, which was validating in so many ways for so many of us who've been struggling with Donald Trump's presence in American politics for so many years. But as to the book, and thank you for your kind words, I felt that it was necessary for me, for myself, and also for other people who've been struggling with the reality we've been living with since at least 2016, to try to make sense of the damage that's been done by Donald Trump, but also originally by the family that created him and also created me. And I felt now was a good time to do it. One, because the election is coming up, and two, because I hit a wall, and I wasn't able to understand why I wasn't able to move on with my life. And I recognize that we've all been traumatized by the last 4 or 8 years, depending on how you count it. And we need to find our way through if we're going to get to the other side of this.
Your book, and especially this one, helps us understand where the cruelty comes from. But it feels like in listening to you over the last 9 years, even you're surprised at his appetite for scaling the cruelty. When you think about what you know, what is your warning for a second Trump presidency?
Well, it can happen. Well, unfortunately, it can happen. What I mean is we cannot allow it to happen. Unfortunately, as you know well, debates don't win elections. And this election will be close for various systemic reasons. I think one of the things Vice President Harris has done so incredibly well is make this a conversation about freedom, not about democracy. Democracy for too many people is sort of an amorphous term. If we talk about freedoms, that's important. We need to get the message across to people who aren't part of the base. You know, there are plenty of people, and we need to wrap our heads around that too, who actually love what Donald's selling. They love the cruelty. They love his contempt for America. They love the authoritarian bent. But for the rest of them, who quite honestly are lied to by the people they're listening to, from Donald on down, we need to convince them that this won't end well for them either. This is a slippery slope. Donald is out for himself. And I said this in 2020, unbelievably enough, we're still having this conversation, and it is even more true now, especially in light of his resounding defeat last night. He knows he might be going down. And if he feels that that's the case, he will take all of us down with him, and we need to be vigilant.
This has been Primetime Weekend. I'm Nicole Wallace. Please tune into Deadline White House and all of our primetime shows weekdays on MSNBC.